What if the man you loved rode away one morning and never came back, and the only thing keeping you alive 3 years later was a miracle you never expected? The crack of a gunshot rolled across the wide Montana prairie as Sarah Jeff watched her husband Benjamin gallop away into the open land. He promised he would return in 3 days. He never did. Now it was 1882, and Sarah stood alone on their homestead, with a 6-year-old daughter depending on her, and a winter coming fast. The cabin was small, worn from years of hard weather. Sarah's auburn hair whipped in the wind as she stared at the empty road where Benjamin had vanished long ago. She had waited, prayed, and cried, but hope had slowly turned into a dull ache she carried every day. "Mama, when is Papa coming back?" Little Emma asked again, pulling at her mother's skirt. Sarah forced a soft smile. "I don't know, sweetheart. But we'll be all right." But they weren't all right. Surviving alone in Montana was a battle Sarah fought every single day. She hunted small game, tended what little food she could grow, and protected Emma from wolves that came too close at night. But she could not chop trees. She could not fix the roof. She could not stop the feeling of fear that lived in her chest when the wind howled in the dark. When the first frost came early and killed the last of her crops, Sarah felt panic settle in her bones. The woodpile outside the cabin was painfully small. Maybe enough for 2 weeks if she used it carefully. Winter in Montana could kill a family with a strong man. For a woman alone with a child, it was nearly impossible. That afternoon, she and Emma gathered sticks near the creek, but Sarah knew it meant nothing. What they needed were real logs, cut and split. What they needed was a man's strength. What they needed was Benjamin. But Benjamin had left them behind. By evening, the sky turned heavy with snow clouds. Sarah tucked Emma into bed, piling blankets around her small body. She read from an old book until Emma's eyelids fluttered closed. When the cabin grew quiet, Sarah sat by the fire and counted what little food they had left, maybe until January. But the wood terrified her. Outside, the wind rose, and snowflakes brushed against the single window. Sarah placed the last log on the fire and wrapped her shawl tighter as fear crept up her spine. She could run to town, but it was 15 miles away. She could try to hunt again, but the storm was coming too fast. She whispered a prayer into the quiet. "Please, send help." Then came the knock. 3 sharp knocks at the door. Sarah froze, her heart racing. Nobody came this far without reason, and reason was rarely good. She grabbed the rifle above the mantel and stepped toward the door. "Who's there?" she called, keeping her voice steady. "Ma'am," a deep voice answered. "Didn't mean to scare you. Name's Brock Zimmerman. Storm caught me on the road. I saw your chimney smoke. I'm only hoping for shelter in your barn or lean-to." It wasn't Benjamin. Her heart sank and raced at the same time. "What do you want?" she asked firmly. "Just a dry place for the night," he said. "I've got my own food. I can pay." She hesitated. "You can stay in the lean-to, that's all." "Yes, ma'am. And, if I may, I noticed your woodpile is low. I've got cut logs on my pack horse. I can leave them here as thanks." Sarah lowered the rifle a little. Firewood. The one thing she needed more than anything. "Leave it by the door," she said. "Then go to the lean-to." "Yes, ma'am." She listened to the sound of footsteps crunching through fresh snow, then returning again and again. He was stacking the wood. Real wood. Strong oak and pine. More than she had seen in months. After he finished, another soft knock came. "Wood stacked, ma'am," he said. "Should last a good while. I'll head to the lean-to now." Sarah waited until she was sure he was gone before opening the door a crack. Her breath caught. A perfect stack of firewood sat outside her cabin. Enough for a week or more. She closed the door with shaking hands. Part of her wanted to call Brock back, offer him a warm meal, a place by the fire. But fear held her back. She would thank him in the morning. That night, Sarah barely slept. Every groan of the wind made her grip the rifle tighter. Every shadow looked like danger creeping toward her home. When dawn finally came, she moved to the window and gasped. Brock Zimmerman was outside, swinging an axe with strong, steady strokes. He was cutting one of the dead pines that stood near the property. He worked with a calm skill that told her he had done this all his life. "Mama, who is that man?" Emma asked, rubbing her eyes. "A traveler," Sarah said softly. "He brought us wood." Emma's eyes widened. "Like Papa was supposed to do?" Sarah swallowed hard. "Yes." Like that. She made breakfast with a warmth she hadn't felt in months. When the biscuits were ready, she wrapped herself in her shawl and stepped outside. "Mr. Zimmerman," she called. He paused and looked down from the tree he was limbing, tall, broad-shouldered, with a dark beard and startling blue eyes. "Morning, ma'am," he said, tipping his hat. "Hope I didn't wake you. Thought I'd make myself useful." Sarah hesitated, then spoke. "You've done more than enough already. I made breakfast. Would you join us?" He wiped the sweat from his brow. "That's kind of you, ma'am." "I'd be honored." And that cold Montana morning, as Brock Zimmerman stepped into her cabin carrying the warmth of a man who knew how to survive the frontier, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Sarah set the warm biscuits on the table while Brock removed his coat, shaking off the bits of snow clinging to the shoulders. He sat carefully, almost shyly, as if he feared disturbing the peaceful cabin he had stepped into. Emma peeked at him from behind her mother's skirt, studying every inch of this stranger who had brought firewood and strength to their small world. "Thank you for breakfast, ma'am," Brock said as Sarah poured him coffee. "Been a long while since I had a proper meal indoors." "You're welcome," Sarah replied. "And please call me Sarah." He nodded once, a quiet respect in his eyes. "Then you can call me Brock." They ate together at the small wooden table. Emma sat beside Sarah, still staring at Brock with wide, curious eyes. She finally spoke in a small voice. "Mr. Brock, do you have a family?" Something changed in his expression, just for a moment. "No, little lady. It's just me and my horse, Thunder." Emma nodded thoughtfully, as if this answered a great mystery. After breakfast, Brock rose. "Thank you kindly, Sarah. I'll get back to that tree before the sun climbs too high." "You've done enough already," she said. "Really, you don't owe us anything." Brock shook his head. "I like to pay my way. Besides, it doesn't sit right with me seeing a woman and child facing winter alone." The simple truth in his voice warmed something inside her that had been cold for a long time. He stepped outside, and Sarah watched him through the window as he chopped and stacked wood with strong, practiced movements. Each swing of the axe was steady and sure. Each log added to the growing pile felt like a blessing she hadn't dared wish for. "He's nice," Emma whispered. "Yes," Sarah said softly. "He is." Quote. By midday, Brock had cut enough wood to last them weeks. He climbed onto the roof next, checking the shingles. Sarah walked out with a fresh mug of coffee, calling up to him, "You don't have to do all of this." He looked down at her with a small smile. "I know, but I want to." Something fluttered in her chest, a feeling she hadn't felt since the early days of her marriage, before everything changed. He came down to take the coffee, and their fingers brushed lightly. A small touch, simple and accidental, but it sent warmth rushing through Sarah. "Roof should hold through the storm," Brock said. "You're safe now." Safe. She couldn't remember the last time she felt that word belonged to her. Later, Brock went hunting and returned at dusk with a deer. He cleaned it behind the barn, working quietly, while the smell of fresh snow filled the air. Inside, Sarah cooked dinner using the meat he brought, filling the cabin with warmth and comfort. When they sat down to eat, Emma stared at Brock with admiration. "You're like a hero," she announced. His cheeks reddened, and he shrugged. "Just a man doing what needs doing." As the fire crackled in the stove, Sarah realized how different this evening felt from the nights she had spent alone, cold, fearful, and fighting back tears. Tonight felt steady, warm, human. After Emma went to bed, Sarah returned to find Brock sitting at the table. carving a small wooden horse with his pocket knife. He looked up, almost embarrassed. "For Emma," he said. "Hope that's all right." "It's more than all right," Sarah whispered. "Thank you." She sat across from him. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of the quiet. She wasn't afraid of being seen. "Can I ask you something?" she said gently. "Anything." "Why are you really helping us?" He opened his mouth, then closed it, searching for the right words. "When I was 12, he finally said, my father went hunting and never returned. My mother and I almost didn't make it through that winter alone. A neighbor helped us, saved our lives. I swore that if I ever came across someone in need, I'd do the same." Sarah's throat tightened. "I understand that more than you know." He nodded. "I figured you might." The firelight flickered across his face, softening the edges of the rough, weather-tanned lines. He had a tiredness in his eyes, but also kindness, a rare mix in the frontier world. "You said you're headed to Oregon," Sarah said. "Why?" "Got land waiting for me." 40 acres. "Thought I'd build something. Start over." He paused. "But sometimes life changes the path a man thinks he's on." Their eyes met, and Sarah felt the air shift between them, something unspoken, something dangerous and comforting at the same time. Before either of them could say more, a low howl of wind shook the cabin. Snow whirled outside, heavy and fast. The storm had arrived. "You should sleep inside tonight," Sarah said suddenly. "It's too cold in the lean-to." Brock hesitated. "I don't want to overstep." "You're not," she said softly. "You've done so much. Please." He nodded slowly. "All right then. Thank you." That night, Brock slept by the fire. Sarah lay awake in her small bedroom, listening to Emma breathe beside her. She stared at the ceiling, her heart full of questions. Why did this stranger feel safer than the man she had married? Why did she trust him so easily? Why did she feel something warm, something new? Morning came gray and quiet. Snow buried the world outside, but inside the cabin, there was warmth Sarah hadn't known in a long time. She stepped into the main room and found Brock sitting with Emma, teaching her a simple game with pebbles on the table. Emma laughed, a bright sound that filled the whole cabin. And for the first time in years, Sarah felt something lift inside her. A lightness, a hope. She didn't know what would come next, but she knew this winter was no longer a death sentence, because Brock Zimmerman had knocked on her door with firewood and brought something far more precious. Hope. Sarah woke the next morning to the sound of quiet talking near the fire. When she stepped into the main room, Brock and Emma were sitting together, arranging pebbles into shapes on the table. Emma's laughter echoed softly, filling the cabin with a warmth Sarah had nearly forgotten could exist. "Morning, Sarah," Brock said, rising to his feet out of habit. "Good morning," she replied, her voice gentle. "Thank you for keeping her busy." "Happy to," he said with a smile that spread warmth through her chest. The winter days that followed settled into a peaceful rhythm Sarah never expected to have again. Brock chopped wood, patched the roof, hunted when the weather allowed, and fixed everything Benjamin had left half done. Each day he brought more life into the cabin, more safety, more steady presence, more light. Emma adored him, and Sarah felt her heart learning something new every day. One snowy morning, she found Brock outside feeding the animals. His breath puffed in the freezing air as he worked, and something about the sight struck her deeply. He looked like he belonged there, like he was meant to be part of their world. When he turned and saw her watching, he smiled the softest smile she had ever seen. "Cold morning," he said. "It doesn't feel so cold anymore," she replied without thinking. Their eyes locked. Neither looked away. That evening, after Emma went to sleep, Sarah and Brock sat by the fire, closer than they had allowed before. The flames danced between them, but it wasn't enough to drown out the feeling that had been slowly building for weeks. "Sarah," Brock said quietly, "there's something I need to tell you." She set down her sewing and looked at him. "What is it?" Quote. He took a slow breath. "I care about you, more than I should, more than I plan to, more than a man passing through has any right to." Her heart pounded hard. "Brock?" He held up a gentle hand. "I know your husband left you. I know you don't know what became of him. I know you're trying your best to survive. I'm not asking for anything." He looked into the fire. "I just needed you to know. Because this winter, you and Emma, you've given me something I hadn't felt in years." Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. "And what's that?" "Home," he whispered. Her breath caught. The word hit her like a warm wave. Soft, steady, true. She reached out, placing her hand over his. His fingers closed gently around hers as if he'd been hoping for that touch all along. "Brock," she said softly, "I care about you too." His eyes lifted to hers, full of emotion he'd been holding back. "Sarah!" But before he could finish, the wind roared against the cabin. A loud crack echoed outside, like a fallen branch. Brock went to check the door, making sure everything was secure. When he returned, Sarah stood waiting by the fire. "Stay," she whispered. He hesitated, only to be sure she truly meant it. Then he stepped closer. She reached up, her fingers brushing his jaw, rough with the day's work. His breath hitched. Slowly, carefully, he lowered his forehead to hers, letting the moment speak for them both. "You're safe with me," he murmured. "Always." Their lips met in a soft, warm kiss, gentle at first, then deeper, as though both had finally stopped running from the loneliness that had chased them for years. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't wild, it was honest. It was a promise whispered without words. When they finally pulled apart, Sarah rested her head on his chest, feeling his steady heartbeat beneath her cheek. "I don't know what the future holds," she whispered. "We'll face it when it comes," he replied softly. "Together if you want." She smiled through her tears. "I want that." And for the first time since Benjamin rode away, Sarah felt her heart open to the possibility of joy. They fell asleep on opposite sides of the fire, close, but still holding onto a respectful distance as they figured out the shape of their new world. Morning arrived slowly. Snow glittered outside. Emma bounded out of bed, excited for another day with Brock. But something was wrong. The sound came faintly at first. The jingle of harness bells, the crunch of hooves on snow. Sarah felt her breath freeze in her chest. Brock heard it too. He stepped toward the window, his body tensing. "Someone's coming," he said quietly. The rider appeared out of the white distance, slow, steady, moving as though every mile had been carved into his bones. He rode closer, leading a pack horse heavy with supplies. Sarah stared, unmoving, unable to breathe. The man pulled off his scarf. Benjamin, her husband, the man she had waited for, the man who had left her behind. Emma froze, confused. Brock's jaw tightened. Sarah's heart shattered and twisted at the same time. Benjamin stopped his horse a few yards from the cabin, staring at the three of them. Sarah standing with her hand still warm from Brock's touch, Emma peeking from behind her mother, Brock standing tall beside them. "Sarah," Benjamin called, "is that really you?" The world went impossibly quiet. Brock stepped back. "I'll give you space," he murmured, though Sarah's shaking hand reached toward him before she could stop herself. He paused, eyes full of worry, full of love, but he forced himself to step away. Sarah swallowed hard. Her voice cracked. "Benjamin, why are you here?" He dismounted, his face worn, his eyes tired. "I've come home." But Sarah no longer knew what home meant. Not after what Brock had brought into her life. Not after the firewood. Not after the hope. Not after the love. She stared at the man she had once waited for. And the man she had come to need. Her future stood split in two paths, one old, one new. Her heart trembled between them, and winter held its breath.